Welcome back to Cracking the Code, the podcast where we break down federal data and turn it into actionable strategy. Today, we're diving into a category that sounds mundane, but it's anything but that. Office Administrative Services, NAICS code 561110. And over the last 5 fiscal years, this sector has accounted for a staggering $3 billion in government spending. I'm Kyle Adams, filling in for Elizabeth Logue, and I'm joined by our lead researcher, Mon, and our industry strategist, and it's good to see you both. We're going to talk through what the numbers are really telling us, where agencies are spending, and what companies should do differently once they understand this market. Okay, great. Let's jump in. When you zoom in and look at the NAICS from a 5-year perspective, we're looking at $3 billion across fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 24. What's the immediate takeaway about who's buying the most administrative capacity?
At scale, this is a multi-billion-dollar services market with sustained demand. From fiscal year 20 through fiscal year 24, total federal spending under NAICS code 561110 exceeded $3 billion, spread across several thousand individual contract actions. What stands out is not just the size, but the consistency. Every year shows strong activity with hundreds of awards annually. And this is not a spike driven by a single event. This is a steady operating expense for the federal government.
And that steadiness is important context. Where is most of the money actually coming from, though?
We could see 3 different agencies taking the lead. The Department of Defense alone accounted for just under $1 billion in spending over that 5-year period across more than 1,000 individual awards. The Homeland Security follows next with over $600 million in total spending. And NASA appears in third place with more than $400 million, which actually surprises people because NASA issues far fewer contracts, but at higher average values. Together, those 3 buyers represent most of the dollars within this NAICS code.
Great. Rena, when you hear that level of concentration, what should companies understand about the nature of this work?
All right, so what companies should really understand that agencies are buying defined operational outcomes, not generic clerical labor. That's not what this NAICS code is about. In this data set that Mon and her team have analyzed, it really means staffing entire military personnel offices, running patient appointment and referral systems for defense health facilities, processing immigration and visa backlogs at scale, managing records, case workflows that directly affect benefits, pay, readiness, compliance. This is administrative work, but it's administrative work tied to mission uptime, not convenience support. So the size of defense and homeland security spend tells us exactly where companies should focus their growth bets. This is a market where success comes from aligning to specific operational lanes, such as personnel processing, medical scheduling, records digitization, case backlog reduction, and then building that repeatable delivery around that lane that your company specializes in. So firms that win consistently here do 3 things well. They hire and retain cleared and credentialed staff tied to one mission function. They get on dominant contract vehicles used by those components. And thirdly, they price for volume and extensions rather than one-time wins. Treating this as a generic admin labor leads to missed recompetes and shallow pipelines.
Okay, good. And Mon, one of the more telling parts of the data is what happens below the department level. Where do the dollars actually concentrate?
When you break it down by agency, the concentration becomes even clearer. We see that within Homeland Security, roughly 2/3 of all NAICS code 561110 spending flow through U.S. citizenship and immigration services, totaling over $400 million. In the case of Treasury, for example, the Internal Revenue Service drove more than 90% of the department's total spend in this NAICS code, with over $200 million awarded. And within defense, the Department of Army was the largest buyer, accounting for just over $400 million, followed by the Department of Air Force and the Navy.
So those aren't fringe offices then. These are operational engines of government. Correct?
Exactly. These are high volume processing environments, immigration cases, tax records, personnel actions. The government is outsourcing administrative capacity at scale because failure in these areas directly impacts their mission outcome.
Rena, when you hear that level of concentration, what should companies understand about the nature of this work?
Yeah, where strategy becomes very concrete. If USCIS is driving the majority of DHS spending, companies should be structuring their business around USCIS buying behavior, not just generic admin support. That means building a capture plan around USCIS owned vehicles, hiring supervisors and team leads who have actually worked immigration adjudications or large scale case processing, investing in surge staffing models tied to backlog reduction, and really packaging past performance to show throughput metrics rather than just staffing counts. That's very important, especially going forward with changes in the acquisition process. Show us success metrics, not just how many people you staffed. So, in practical terms, winners here are showing how many cases they can move, how fast they can onboard cleared staff, how they can reduce cycle times for agencies, not just that they can provide administrative labor. We also saw that individual contracts in this NAICS code range from a few $100,000 to well over $10 million, depending on scope. So, what really signals is that this is a growth ladder. Many companies enter the market through smaller, tightly scoped task orders, then expand into higher value contracts by proving that they can meet metrics, throughput, reliability, ability to scale teams across locations. So agencies are clearly willing to grow vendors over time under this NAICS code, but only when you earn wins, when you translate into operational trust and expand your scope within your current client base.
Okay, good. Thank you. Man, let's talk about small businesses versus large businesses. What does the data show there?
If we look first by our count, we saw that small businesses are very active. In recent years, small firms have won more than twice as many contracts as large businesses. For example, in fiscal year 24 alone, small businesses received just under 500 awards compared to fewer than 200 for large firms. And the weird thing is that this maintains when you look at the total obligated dollars awarded. Small businesses still dominate. The single largest recipient over the 5-year period received more than $100 million, while the top small business performer was over $200 million. However, we see that the top performers in terms of total obligated dollars awarded is not the same when looking at the top contractors that receive the greatest number of awards.
So we could say then that this gap between volume and dollar value really defines how companies need to think about their growth path in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. It really shows that there are two viable but very different paths. One is volume driven model where companies build pipelines of smaller repeatable awards and grow through consistency. The data shows hundreds of awards flowing through that channel. The other path is access to large scale programs that almost always requires the right contract vehicles and strong teaming relationships. Large primes need small businesses for delivery and compliance, but they also expect those partners to show up early and act like capture partners, not passengers after award, which is where a lot of small businesses make that mistake. It's invest early, be that capture partner for your large business. That also means doing independent market research, understanding the customer's buying history, contributing solution ideas, and helping shape the opportunity long before that award happens. So firms that wait quietly for a subcontract payout rarely get pulled into the next year of work by these larges.
Okay. And so, timing is another pattern that came through clearly in the research. So, what does the spending cadence look like across the fiscal year?
Timing is mostly everything, and in this case, it is highly predictable. Quarter one is consistently the slowest spending period. Activity increases in quarters two and three, and the fourth quarter is the peak every year. In some years, more than a third of the total annual spending occur in the final quarter alone. That tells us agencies are obligating funds late in the fiscal year under significant time pressure.
Okay. And Rena, that timing insight has real implications for how companies plan capture and delivery in this market.
Yeah, the companies should plan continuously, not seasonally. The firms that succeed here are instrumenting their pipeline year round using data, prior award history, the recompete timing, not waiting for formal sources sought to appear. They're tracking incumbent task orders, monitoring staffing churn, mapping vehicle usage patterns, and proactively shaping demand with program offices long before budget pressures hit. By the time Q4 arrives, they are executing pre-positioned plays, not reacting to last-minute solicitations. And when agencies are buying under pressure that you see in that Q4, they value speed, low risk, and continuity. And that's reflected by the numbers we see between the large and the small business awards, the volumes and the dollars. But companies that can demonstrate rapid onboarding, stable delivery, align directly with how the government is actually buying and how the government is actually behaving in their buying patterns.
Okay. And this is exactly why we do these conversations, because the numbers give us scale, but the insight comes from understanding what they mean in practice. Rena, thank you both for walking through this market. For those listening, the full NAICS 561110 report is available for download with detailed agency and sub-agency breakdowns. So visit www.bidexecs.com. We will be back next time to crack the code on another corner of the federal market.